everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about solving rational equations. This is really a test review video with lots of problems. We just reviewed rational expressions, so if you need to review any of these topics here, click on the link below. So these problems in this video are all about solving rational equations, and recall that there are really several methods you can use to do that. Basically, we want to simplify by getting rid of the denominator, whether you cross multiply or zap the frac. Then you want to factor and simplify at the end and solve for x, and be sure to look for extraneous solutions. So I've posted here 10 problems that we are going to work through. So pause the video, try to work all 10 on your own, and then resume the video and we'll work through them. So here we go. Number 1. So for this problem, since we already have one fraction on each side of the equal sign, I think it's easiest to just cross multiply. So let's do that. And then remember, I need to distribute. So it's a good idea to put all your binomial terms in parentheses. And then I need to get my x's on one side. So I get 5x minus 4x, I get x. And I'm going to add 20 to the other side to get 8. Now don't forget to check for extraneous solutions. In this case, the excluded value for this function or this equation would be x equals 4. So we got 8. 8 works out fine. We're okay to go. All right, moving on to number 2. Again, I would probably cross multiply since I already have one fraction on each side. So let's do that. And then we need to remember to distribute again. And then we'll solve for x. So we get 3x on the left. Let's add 40. So we get 54. 54 divided by 3 is 18. Again, I can look for my extraneous solutions. I can also plug in 18 into the equation to check it and make sure it works. And that just helps me know that my math was correct. And in both cases, these will simplify to 1/2. So it's a true statement. 18 is not an excluded value, so we are okay with that. On to number 3. Okay, this one's a little different because I have 3 different denominators. So for this one, I'm going to do what we call zap the frac. So I want to zap the fraction. And the way I do that is I identify the least common denominator, which is 8. And then I'm going to multiply 8 times all of the terms in the equation on both sides of the equal sign. So we're going to distribute that 8 to all 3 terms. And when you show your work, you don't have to show all of these steps, but I'm doing that for clarification here, just so you don't get lost, because I know I'm going really fast since we're reviewing and I'm trying to get as many problems as we can. So now I want to simplify and cross out my common factors. So I'm left with 3 is equal to 4 times 1 is 4 plus, and now I need to distribute that to 2x plus 12. And then I'll simplify so I can combine my numbers here. And so when I simplify, I'm going to subtract the 16 to the other side, and I'm going to end up with a fraction here, and that's going to be okay. Don't get all worried if you get a fraction as your answer. So I get x equals negative 13/2. Number 4. Again, I have one fraction on each side of the equal sign, so I'm going to cross multiply in this case. And I'm going to get x times x minus 4 is equal to x times x plus 1. Make sure we distribute. And then I'm going to simplify. So x squared minus x squared, those will cancel out. And then I subtract the x, and I get 0 on this side. So I get x equals 0. Now, some people get really confused on problems like this because they don't know what happens when the x squareds cancel out, and then they end up with x on one side of the equation and nothing on the other side. That's okay, we just get x equals 0. Plug in 0 for x. Make sure you're checking your excluded values. The excluded values here are -1 and 4. So 0 works out just fine. So 0 is our answer. And we're set. All right, moving on to number 5. All right, this looks like something we would cross multiply, but take a closer look. The denominator is exactly the same, but it's going to be a little tricky. When the denominator is the same, that makes it easier. I just need to set the numerators equal to each other and solve for x. So I get 2x equals 8, x equals 4. But wait a minute. When I look at my excluded values, can I have x equals 4? My excluded value is 4. So x equals 4 doesn't work. So since x equals 4 doesn't work, that's my only solution. So my answer to this problem is no solution. And that's exactly what I would write on my paper. So I realize I'm talking really fast. If you need to pause the video and go back and rework any of these, please do. All right, number 6. In this case, I have 3 different factors in the denominator. So I'm going to zap the frac and first identify the least common denominator. So I want to factor that x squared minus 1, and that's a difference of squares. So the least common denominator will be x plus 1 times x minus 1. And so when I zap the frac, I'm going to multiply my least common denominator by all 3 terms. And I'll write this in the factored form here because it'll be easier. And again, I recommend putting parentheses around those binomials so we don't forget to distribute and we know that we can cross out the entire common factor. So let's go ahead and distribute that least common denominator. And we'll write that in red here so we can see what we're doing. And we'll multiply times x here, and then equals, and we're going to get 2 over our common denominator. So all of that's going to cancel out. So let's cancel out our factors here. So I'm going to cancel out my x plus 1 with the x plus 1. I'm left with 2 times x minus 1. And so the whole point of doing this is to get rid of the denominator. So if you do this and you don't zap the frac, in other words, you don't get rid of the denominator, then you did something wrong. So you can go back and check your work or check your least common denominator and see if you figured that out correctly. So let's distribute. So we get x squared plus x equals 2. And now I'm just going to combine my like terms, and I'm going to start with x squared because that's the highest exponent. And then let's combine my x terms and then my constant. So I have -2 on the left and 2 on the right. So I'm going to subtract 2. Don't screw that up and think you cross out those 2's. They're not the same value. And now, what do I need to do to solve for x? I need to factor. So I need to factor x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. And that's not too bad to factor. None of these problems will be too tough to factor. So you just need to remember there are a lot of steps involved here. So now I factored it. I need to set each of those factors equal to 0. So I end up with x equals 1 and x equals negative 4. And now I need to check for any extraneous solutions. So let's go up to the original problem and see if 1 or negative 4, if either of those are excluded values for this equation. So if I look at x equals 1, sure enough, my excluded values here are x equals 1 and negative 1. And so since x equals 1 was one of my solutions, and it's also an excluded value, I just cross through that answer. It doesn't work as a solution because that would make the expression undefined, and I only end up with one solution here to this problem. So that x equals 1 would be the extraneous solution. Okay, just a few more here. So number 7. So this one is pretty straightforward, but it can be tricky. So let's see how you did. So for this one, I would cross multiply. So I get x squared on the left, and then 2 times x squared minus 8. And I want to make sure and distribute. So I get x squared equals 2x squared minus 16. I'm going to subtract the x squared to the higher x squared side. So 2x squared minus x squared. And I'm left with 0 is equal to x squared minus 16. So if you did it this way, you probably didn't screw it up. You would factor. So we get difference of squares, x plus 4 times x minus 4. And I set each factor equal to 0. And I get my two answers, negative 4 and positive 4. You can also solve this with square roots. And this is probably the more common way that students solve this problem. So I would set x squared equals 16. But remember, when you take the square root of something, you have to remember plus and minus. So I end up with x equals plus and minus 4, which gives me my same two answers. But how many of you didn't do plus or minus and you just got x equals 4? So this is a tricky one because we need to get both of those answers. So both of the answers work. I can plug them both in to my equation. Neither of them are excluded values. So don't forget the plus or minus. That's a very common mistake. So number 8, what would you do here? I would zap the frac, and the reason is I have 3 different denominators here. So I identify my least common denominator, which is x squared, and I can think of that 1 as 1 over 1 if that helps you. So I'm going to multiply x squared times all 3 terms here, and distribute that as we've done in the past. So I get x squared times negative 6 all over x plus x squared times 1 which is just x squared equals 7 x squared all over x squared. So my x squareds will cancel out here. And so in that first term, x squared divided by x, I end up with just a negative 6x plus x squared equals 7. So now I have a quadratic, so I need to rearrange these terms and factor. So let's rewrite this. X squared minus 6x equals 7, or minus 7 equals 0. And if we factor that, again, not too hard to factor these problems. So I end up with two different answers. X equals 7 and x equals negative 1. So let's go back and check our original problem. Can I use 7 and negative 1 in the denominator here? My excluded value is x equals 0, so I'm okay with both of these answers. They both work, and so I will have two solutions to this problem. So almost there, just two more problems. Number 9. So what would you do here? So let's see. Let's start by factoring this trinomial, and then we can figure out what our least common denominator is. So in this case, again, I have three different denominators, so I'm going to zap that frac. So I'm going to multiply my least common denominator by all three terms. I'll leave a little bit more space here. And let's show this denominator in factored form. And then let's distribute. So we're going to put x minus 3 times x plus 2, x minus 3 times x plus 2, x minus 3 times x plus 2, and then let's go ahead and erase that. I just kind of skipped a step of rewriting it a second time. And now we can simplify our common factors. So what will cancel out here? X minus 3. So I'm left with x times x plus 2. And then the next term, I'm going to cancel out my x plus 2's. So I get 4 times x minus 3. And then on this one, both of those common factors will cancel out. So I'm left with 15. So now we just distribute and combine our like terms. All right, so let's see. I only have one x squared. So let's write that one down, and then I'll combine my x's. So I get 6x, and then I'm going to subtract 15 over to the left side of the equal sign, and I get minus 27 equals 0, and now I can factor. So let's factor that. So 9 and 3 will give me a difference of 6. So x plus 9 equals 0, so I get x equals negative 9. And I get x equals 3. So let's go check those excluded values. So negative 9 and x equals 3. Let's look at those excluded values from the beginning. What do you know? What do you see as an excluded value? X equals 3 is one of my excluded values, because that would make the denominator equal to 0. So since 3 is an excluded value, I end up with one solution, just x equals negative 9. So just cross through, make sure you deliberately cross through that extraneous solution. So it's obvious that you got that answer, you checked it, and you know it doesn't work in the problem. So whether you're putting a box around your final answer or writing your answer in the blank, that's really important. So last one, number 10. So let's go ahead and factor x times x minus 4. And again, I'm going to zap the frac. So I'm going to find my least common denominator, which would be x times x minus 4. And when I multiply that through across all three terms in the equation, and cross out my common factors, and then let's combine the x times x plus 2. I get x squared plus 2x is equal to, I'm left with just 4, plus 1 times x minus 4, so that's just x minus 4. And then I can combine my like terms and simplify, so 4 minus 4, that's just 0. So I get x squared plus 2x, and I have to subtract an x to the left. So I get x squared plus x equals 0. Remember, you never divide by a variable. So it's really better if we get everything on the left side of the equation and we factor. So once I do this, I get two answers, x equals 0 and x equals -1. And so let's check our extraneous solutions. What do you see? So did we have anything that was an excluded value that also is one of our answers? So let's check it. So my excluded values are where I'm setting my denominator equal to 0. So I definitely have an excluded value of 0 there. And then I would also have x equals 4. So I can't use x equals 0, but I do still get my answer of x equals -1. So again, on this problem, I have one solution that works. So I want to deliberately cross through that answer that doesn't work and circle the one that does, which is x equals -1. Whew, we did it. We did all 10 problems. So you can do the happy dance now. Hopefully you did a really good job and you feel great for your test or your quiz that's coming up. You can do it. It just takes some practice. Thanks so much for watching and good luck.